broken promises. The observation deck stretched wide and empty, save for two figures silhouetted against the endless stars. Mira Chen pressed her palm against the cold glass, watching Earth rotate slowly below. Behind her, Lieutenant James Harding stood with his arms crossed, his reflection ghosting over hers in the transparent surface. "You're thinking too much again," James said softly, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Mira turned, finding his eyes already on her. "Elena's transport leaves tomorrow. She's so excited about the colony on Kepler 442. She doesn't know what's coming." James reached out, his fingers brushing against hers in a gesture that had become increasingly familiar over the past months. "The assembly won't act yet. They're posturing." "You don't believe that?" Her voice held no accusation, only tired truth. He didn't answer, and his silence said everything. Instead, he pulled her close, and she let herself sink into the embrace. They had been dancing around this connection for weeks, stolen glances during briefings, hands touching as they passed tablets, conversations that stretched long past midnight. Neither had spoken the words, but both knew. The moment shattered as alarms shrieked through the station. Red light bathed the observation deck, and James's communicator erupted with urgent voices. "All military personnel report to stations. Repeat, this is not a drill." They ran together through corridors filling with panicked civilians. At the military junction, James stopped, gripping her shoulders. "Get to the civilian bunkers." "Promise me, James, promise me, Mira." She nodded, but her eyes held defiance. "Come back to me." He kissed her then, fierce and brief, a promise sealed with desperation. Then he was gone, sprinting toward the fighter bays. 3 hours later, Mira stood in the assembly chamber's viewing gallery alongside thousands of others. Below, Ambassador Victoria Ross faced the Alien Council, a collection of beings both magnificent and terrible. The assembly speaker, a crystalline entity named Xyloth, towered over the human delegation. "Earth has violated 37 regulations." Xyloth's voice resonated like breaking glass. "Your expansion is reckless. Your weapons development, unauthorized. This council hereby places Earth under permanent supervision. You will disarm. You will obey. You will accept our governors." Victoria Ross stood motionless for a long moment. Then she removed her ambassador's insignia and let it clatter to the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Earth recognizes no master but itself," she declared. "Withdraw your demands or face consequences you cannot imagine." The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien voices shrieked and howled. But Mira heard none of it. Her communicator was vibrating with an incoming message from Elena's transport, the message she would never get to read. Outside, in the black void beyond Earth's moon, the Assembly's enforcement fleet was already moving into position. The first shots had not yet been fired, but war had already begun. Ashes and embers. The silence lasted 3 seconds after the explosion. Then Mira's world collapsed into screaming. Elena's transport, the New Dawn, had been vaporized near Mars. 2,000 colonists reduced to burning fragments scattered across the void. Mira watched the footage loop on every screen, her sister's smiling face frozen in the last transmission, waving goodbye to a future she would never see. James found her in the engineering bay, surrounded by half-assembled weapon systems. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her hands moved mechanically, calibrating targeting arrays with a precision born from rage. "Mira." He approached carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't tell me she's in a better place. Don't tell me it will be okay." He knelt beside her instead, saying nothing. When her hands finally stopped moving and began to shake, he caught them in his own. The dam broke. She turned into him, sobbing against his chest while he held her, his own tears falling silent into her hair. "I'm going to make them pay," she whispered against his uniform. "Every single one of them." "We will." His lips brushed her forehead. Together. That night, in the quiet darkness of his quarters, they found solace in each other. Their lovemaking was desperate, fierce, 2 people clinging to life in the face of death. Afterward, tangled in sheets, Mira traced the scars on his chest while he mapped constellations across her bare shoulders with gentle fingers. "Promise me something," she murmured. "Anything. When this is over, take me somewhere we can see real stars. Not through glass, not from orbit, Just stars. He kissed her temple. I promise. Across the city, in a dim diplomatic suite, Ambassador Victoria Ross received an unexpected visitor. The door chimed past midnight, and she opened it to find Commander Taven Kraz standing in the shadows. The alien's bioluminescent markings pulsed with anxiety, stripes of amber and blue running along his neck and forearms. I shouldn't be here, Taven said in careful English. His accent musical, yet you are. Victoria stepped aside, letting him enter. They had met during the failed peace negotiations 6 months prior. What began as professional respect had evolved into something neither could name. Something dangerous. Taven moved to the window, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back. The Assembly's war fleet launches in 48 hours. 3,000 ships. They mean to sterilize your world. Victoria's breath caught. Why tell me this? You're risking execution for treason. He turned, his golden eyes meeting hers. Because what they did to your people was murder. Because I have watched you fight for peace while my leaders choose slaughter. He paused. Because I cannot bear to see you die. She crossed to him, her hand hovering near his face before finally touching his cheek. His skin was warm, smooth like polished stone. Taven, I know what I am asking is impossible, he whispered. I know I am your enemy. You're not my enemy. She rose on her toes and he bent down, their foreheads touching in a gesture that transcended species. You never were. Below them, in bunkers carved deep into Earth's crust, General Marcus Stone stood before a holographic display showing dozens of hidden warships. Each vessel bore names of tragedy: Remember Mars, Elena's Vengeance, Never Again. His second-in-command approached. Sir, all fleets report ready. Crews are boarding now. Stone nodded slowly. Then it's time. Send the activation codes. Across the solar system, in asteroid bases and underwater facilities, in hidden shipyards on distant moons, humanity's secret arsenal awakened. Engines that had waited years in silence began to hum. Weapons charged. Pilots climbed into cockpits, many knowing they might never return. The war had begun with murder. Now came the reckoning. First blood. James Harding's fighter screamed through the void, part of a strike wing of 50 vessels painted black as the space between stars. Ahead, the Assembly destroyer Righteous Judgment hung in orbit like a monument to arrogance. The same ship that had fired on the New Dawn. All wings, weapons free, came the command. Make them remember this day. James's targeting computer locked onto the destroyer's engines. His finger hovered over the trigger, and he thought of Mira, of Elena's smile in that final transmission, of every innocent life snuffed out by alien pride. For Earth, he whispered, and fired. Rail cannon rounds tore through space at relativistic speeds. The destroyer's shields flared, then shattered. Atmosphere vented in glittering streams. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull like dominoes. Within 90 seconds, the Righteous Judgment was the expanding cloud of debris. The Assembly never saw it coming. Human ships materialized from the darkness, from behind asteroids, from beneath Europa's ice, from the shadow of Saturn's rings. What the aliens expected to be an easy subjugation became a massacre. Their formation broke. Their commanders panicked. Their ships burned. Mira watched the battle from the bridge of the Defiance, a heavy cruiser whose weapons she had personally upgraded. Each time the rail cannons fired, the deck shuddered beneath her feet. Each impact was a prayer for Elena. Target destroyed, reported the tactical officer. 3 more incoming on Vector 9-7. Fire solution ready? Mira responded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Firing now. The cruiser's main cannon spoke. A beam of concentrated energy that carved through an alien frigate like a knife through paper. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Only the cold necessity of survival. When the battle ended 4 hours later, the void was filled with wreckage. The Assembly's task force, 23 ships, had been reduced to 7 fleeing survivors. Human casualties were lighter than expected. Hope, dangerous and intoxicating, began to spread. James returned to the Defiance exhausted, his flight suit soaked with sweat. Mira met him in the hangar bay, and they collided in a fierce embrace, both needing to confirm the other still lived. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I kept my promise, he said hoarsely. I came back. She kissed him hard, tasting salt and desperation. Around them, Crew members politely looked away, granting them this moment of intimacy amid the carnage. Later, in her quarters, they lay entwined while the ship traveled through dark space. Mira rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, a sound that meant life, that meant hope. "Do you think they'll surrender now?" she asked quietly. James's hand traced lazy patterns on her back. "No, we've humiliated them. They'll come back with everything they have. Good." Her voice was soft but sharp as broken glass. "I want them all to come. I want them to see what happens when you murder our families." He held her tighter, understanding the darkness growing in both their hearts. Far across the galaxy, in a luxury suite on the Assembly's throne world, Victoria Ross paced while Taven uploaded encrypted files to her secured datapad. "Fleet deployments, supply routes, command codes," he explained rapidly. "Everything I could access without triggering security protocols. Taven, if they catch you, they will execute me." "I know." He straightened, his bioluminescent markings pulsing with resolve. "Some things are worth dying for." She grabbed his hand, so different from her own, yet so warm. "Then don't die." "Come with me. Defect. Earth will protect you." His laugh was bitter. "And spend my life as a traitor, knowing my people will hunt me forever." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers again. "I do this for you, Victoria, so your world survives. So perhaps one day there can be peace." "I love you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Taven's eyes widened, all the emotion his rigid facial structure could show. "Your species and mine were not meant to feel such things for each other. And yet we do." He kissed her then, awkward and tender, two beings from different worlds trying to bridge an impossible divide. When they parted, his markings glowed brighter than she'd ever seen. "Win this war, Victoria. Make my sacrifice mean something." As he disappeared into the night, Victoria clutched the datapad containing humanity's salvation, purchased with an alien's love and courage. Above Earth, General Stone reviewed casualty reports and smiled grimly. The Assembly thought one battle would teach them caution. They were about to learn that humanity's mercy had died with the new dawn. Rising flames. The galaxy was burning, and humanity held the torch. In the 3 weeks following the Battle of Jupiter, human fleets struck 27 Assembly outposts. They liberated slave colonies on 6 worlds. They destroyed supply depots, communication relays, and military installations with surgical precision. Each victory was broadcast across every network, every frequency, every corner of known space. The oppressed were watching, and they were learning. On a mining world called Cathara, slaves who had toiled for generations under Assembly overseers rose in revolt. They painted human symbols on their prison walls and sang songs about Earth's defiance. Assembly peacekeepers sent to quell the uprising were met with improvised weapons and desperate fury. 3 days later, Cathara was free. It wasn't the only world. Rebellions erupted like wildfire across 12 systems. The Assembly's iron grip was melting, and its leaders knew panic for the first time in centuries. James's fighter wing had become legendary, the Elena's Angels, named for the fallen. They struck from nowhere, left nothing but wreckage, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. But fame came with a price. During a raid on an Assembly weapons platform, James's fighter took a direct hit. The explosion tore through his cockpit, shrapnel shredding his leg and shoulder. He managed to limp back to the Defiance on emergency thrusters, consciousness fading as blood painted his viewport red. Mira was waiting in the medical bay when they carried him in. She scrubbed into surgery alongside the doctors, her hands steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. For 8 hours she worked, extracting metal fragments, repairing torn tissue, refusing to let him slip away. When he finally woke, her face was the first thing he saw. She was holding his hand, head bowed in exhaustion. "Hey," he croaked. Her head snapped up, eyes red from crying. "You promised to come back to me." "You didn't say you'd come back in pieces." He managed a weak smile. "At least I'm consistent." She kissed him softly, carefully, mindful of his injuries. "Don't ever scare me like that again. Can't promise that. But I can promise I'll always fight to get back to you." In the days of his recovery, they carved out stolen moments of normalcy. She would read to him from pre-war novels. He would tell her stories about growing up in the mountains of Colorado. They made love gently, her body curved around his healing form. each touch a reaffirmation of life amid so much death. "When this ends," James whispered one night, "I'm taking you to those mountains. We'll build a house where you can see nothing but stars and trees. I'm holding you to that." "Lieutenant." But their peace was shattered when Victoria Ross arrived on the Defiance, her face drawn with exhaustion and grief. She called an emergency meeting with General Stone, Mira, James, and the senior staff. "Taven is dead," she announced without preamble. Her voice was hollow. "Assembly Intelligence discovered his communications with me. They executed him publicly 3 days ago." Mira reached across the table, squeezing Victoria's hand. The ambassador's eyes were dry. She had no tears left. "Before they killed him," Victoria continued, "he transmitted final intelligence. The Assembly is gathering its entire military might, every ship from every system, over 5,000 vessels. They're calling it the Spear of Eternity." She looked up, her gaze hard as diamond. "They're coming to end us." General Stone leaned back, studying the holographic display of enemy ship movements. "When? 2 weeks. Maybe less. Then we have 2 weeks to prepare." Stone's jaw tightened. "We hit them first. We take the fight to their capital before they can fully mobilize." "That's suicide," one admiral protested. "We'd be outnumbered 10-1. "We're already outnumbered," Mira interjected quietly. "But they don't have what we have. They don't have desperation. They don't have rage. They've never had to fight for their very existence." James nodded despite his pain. "She's right. They've grown soft behind their power. We'll show them what real war looks like." The meeting continued for hours, planning humanity's greatest gamble. When it ended, Victoria remained behind with Mira. "I envy you," Victoria said softly. "You have James. You have hope. Taven and we never had a chance." "He loved you," Mira replied. "That meant something. That changed something. His sacrifice will save millions." Victoria's facade finally cracked and she wept. Mira held her as she once held Elena, 2 women bound by loss in a universe too cruel for the love they'd found. Across the ship, James stood in the hangar bay despite Doctor's orders, inspecting his repaired fighter. Mira found him there, arms crossed. "You're supposed to be in bed. Can't rest." "Not now," he turned to her. "Mira, if something happens to me in the final battle, stop. Listen. If I don't make it back, I need you to know." She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and demanding. When they broke apart, her eyes blazed. "You're coming back." "We both are. And then you're taking me to see those mountains. Understood?" He pulled her close, breathing in her scent. Understood. But they both knew the truth. The final battle would demand everything, and some of them wouldn't survive to see the peace they were fighting for. The fleet began preparations for the last strike. Farewells were spoken, letters were written, and humanity steeled itself for the reckoning that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Dawn of freedom. The Assembly's throne world gleamed like a jewel in the void, pristine, arrogant, untouched by war. Its orbital stations bristled with weapons, its defense fleets numbering in the thousands. To the alien leaders watching from their crystal towers, victory seemed inevitable. They had forgotten that humanity's greatest strength was not hope, but spite. The human armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Every ship humanity could spare, every pilot who could fly, every weapon that could fire. General Stone stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, Victoria Ross beside him in a tactical uniform rather than diplomatic robes. "All ships, battle stations," Stone ordered. "Today we end this tyranny. Today we show the galaxy what freedom costs." The Spear of Eternity moved to intercept, a wall of alien ships so vast it seemed to eclipse the stars themselves. The odds were catastrophic. The humans didn't care. James strapped into his fighter alongside the rest of Elena's angels. Mira sat at the weapons console of the Defiance, her fingers dancing across controls. Across the fleet, men and women from every nation on Earth prepared to die together. The 2 armadas collided like galaxies crashing. Space became chaos. Energy beams crisscrossed the void in lethal geometry. Missiles swarmed like angry insects. Ships exploded in blossoms of fire and debris. Human vessels, smaller and more agile, darted through the enemy formation like sharks, targeting command ships and carrier groups. James's squadron punched through the enemy line, his railguns shredding a cruiser's engines. An alien fighter locked onto his tail, but he barrel-rolled through a debris field, using the wreckage as cover. His wingman, a young pilot named Torres, wasn't as lucky. James watched her fighter disintegrate in a blast of plasma. "For Torres!" he screamed, pulling hard on the stick and lighting up the fighter that killed her. On the Defiance, Mira orchestrated a deadly symphony. "Target the carrier, forward batteries. Fire as she bears." The ship's massive cannons spoke, and an assembly carrier broke in half, spilling smaller craft into the void like dying embers. But the human fleet was bleeding. For every alien ship destroyed, they lost precious vessels they couldn't replace. The mathematics of attrition were brutal. Then came the miracle. From beyond the battle, new signatures appeared on sensors. Dozens of ships bearing unknown configurations. The Catharan rebels had cobbled together a fleet from salvaged hulls. Behind them came vessels from 3 other liberated worlds, species that had suffered under the Assembly's heel and now sought vengeance alongside humanity. The tide shifted. The Assembly fleet, expecting an easy victory, suddenly faced enemies on multiple fronts. Their formation collapsed into chaos. Ships collided in confusion. Orders went unheeded as panic spread. General Stone saw the opening. "All ships push through to the throne world, now!" Human vessels poured through the gap, James's fighters leading the way. The orbital defense stations opened fire, but Mira's targeting solutions were flawless. Every shot found vulnerable points. Every blast carved through shields and armor. As the Defiance entered high orbit, an Assembly battleship rammed them broadside. The impact threw Mira from her station, alarms shrieking. "Hull breaches on 3 decks, power failing." But she pulled herself up, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, and kept firing. James's squadron began their final run on the planetary shields. The generators sat in fortified bunkers, seemingly impenetrable. He thought of Elena, of Mira, of every human who had died for this moment. "All craft concentrate fire on grid coordinate 773, he ordered. 20 fighters unleashed everything they had. The shield flickered, weakened, failed. "Shields down," James transmitted to the fleet. "The city is open!" But as he pulled up from the dive, an enemy missile found him. The explosion tore his fighter apart. James ejected at the last second, his pod tumbling toward the planet's surface in a fireball of atmospheric entry. "James!" Mira's scream echoed across fleet communications. "Someone get him." "Please, someone—" "I'm on it," replied a voice she recognized. Commander Krause's former aide, an alien defector now flying for humanity. "I see his pod. I'll retrieve him." Below, in the Assembly's grand chamber, Xyloth and the other leaders finally understood what they had created. They hadn't been fighting a war of conquest. They'd been fighting a war of extermination, and they were losing. Victoria Ross stood at the bow of a boarding craft as it punched through the chamber's crystal dome. Marines poured out behind her, securing the space in minutes. She walked slowly to where Xyloth cowered, her face a mask of cold fury. "You killed my love," she said quietly. "You killed thousands of innocents. You believed yourselves gods." She raised a pistol. "You were wrong." The shot echoed through the chamber and across the galaxy. 3 hours later, the battle ended. The Assembly fleet was shattered. The Throne World's government had surrendered, and in the ruins of a crashed fighter on the planet's surface, Mira found James, battered, burned, but alive. She dropped to her knees beside him, sobbing as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I promised," he whispered hoarsely. "I promised I'd come back. You idiot. You beautiful idiot." She kissed him through tears of joy and relief. In orbit, General Stone accepted the Assembly's unconditional surrender. But instead of claiming victory, humanity did something the galaxy had never seen. They refused to rule. "Break your throne," Victoria told the defeated aliens. "Dismantle your empire. Let every world choose its own path. We didn't fight for conquest. We fought for freedom." 6 months later, on a mountainside in Colorado, Mira and James stood on the porch of a half-built cabin. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, untouched by the war that had reshaped civilization. "Was it worth it?" Mira asked softly, her hand finding his. James was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. We saved the galaxy, but we lost so much." He thought of Torres, of Elena, of the countless dead. Maybe that's the price of freedom. It has to cost everything, or it means nothing. She leaned against him, and they watched the stars in silence. 2 survivors of humanity's wrath, finding peace at last. Across the galaxy, on a monument built in orbit around Earth, billions of names were etched in eternal steel. Among them, Elena Chen, Commander Taven Kraz, Lieutenant Maria Torres, and thousands more who had paid the ultimate price. The inscription read simply, "They crossed the line." We answered, "Never again." Humanity had shown the galaxy its fury. Now it would show them its mercy. The age of tyrants was over. The age of freedom had begun, and in the darkness between stars the universe trembled, not with fear, but with hope.